EGM Network.
Welcome to Scouted Treasure Coast, a new weekly podcast focusing on local businesses, community leaders, and nonprofit change makers shaping the face of the Treasure Coast. I am Amy Branden, editor-owner of the Scout Guide Treasure Coast, and I'd like to welcome you to this first episode of Scouted Treasure Coast. We have McKee Botanical Gardens joining us today. Marion de Vogel, great-granddaughter of Arthur McKee, co-founder, board member, and tireless advocate. I do want to say that Rochelle, the executive director, was going to join us today, but was called away as the garden is receiving another award. So she had to, so they're dividing and conquering today.
We are.
So to kick off this series, I couldn't think of a more meaningful lady to join us. We're honored to welcome you. So the first question that I have is, the garden is going to be a century-year-old in 2032?
So we're celebrating the centennial next year.
Okay.
2026.
Okay.
And there's an interesting story to why we can celebrate the centennial. Before it became a roadside attraction, it was initially a commercial nursery, which my great-grandfather and Waldo Sexton used to supply landscaping to their development at Vero Beach Country Club. Many people don't know that McKee and Sexton actually developed Vero Beach Country Club, which at the time was a 400-acre spot from the train to the river, in which they developed homes and a golf course. And so as they built the homes, they felt they needed some landscaping. And my great-grandfather, who was a tremendous collector of orchids, fancied the idea of sending plant explorers to South America to bring back exotic specimens for their nursery. So they had this nursery on the perimeter of what became McKee Jungle Gardens. And that is how we are celebrating the 100th anniversary. It's the collections that came, the exotic specimens that came from South America in 1926.
Okay, wow. All right. Well, I saw in the email that you sent yesterday, 1932.
Was the public opening.
Okay, and that's what put Vero Beach on the map.
That's right.
And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because in my memory, it was said that as travelers would come down US 1, this was their stop, much like Disney World.
Yes, the two things were ultimately competing.
Right.
But McKee was there long before traffic went inland through Interstate 95 and the Turnpike. And actually, McKee opened before there was even a US 1. It was originally only Old Dixie Highway, which started in Chicago. Many people think that came all the way down the East Coast, but in fact, came from the Midwest, which is why so many people from the Midwest ended up here.
Yeah.
But so I think my great-grandfather, who really hadn't intended to invest in property here, did so because his cousin had purchased quite a bit of land with Waldo and intended to grow citrus. But his cousin died rather suddenly. And so Waldo turned to my great-grandfather and said, "Would you be interested?" And he was. And he invested in all of the properties that his cousin had started and then added to it. And it was the development of these properties that ultimately helped, as well as Henry Flagler's Railroad. That's a very important reason why this area was settled. The station in Vero opened in 1903. And so now we had some development and lovely places for people to live, and country clubs were being built. And these exotic specimens were in this commercial nursery on the perimeter of what became the first roadside attraction. And I think my great-grandfather and Waldo realized there was an opportunity now with people coming to entertain them. So why not invite William Lyman Phillips, who was a Olmsted Brothers landscape architect, to design a tropical garden in which these exotic specimens were introduced in a haphazard way, not planned or organized the way many botanical gardens are. And that became McKee Jungle Gardens. And it did become very quickly the third most important visitor destination in Florida, and it put Vero on the map. No question, put Vero on the map.
So My understanding is that the architecture or the landscape architect that did McKee, is he the same architect that did Central Park, or is there a
Yes,
relation
there is a relationship. It's a little bit generational. So
Okay.
Frederick Law Olmsted is the man associated with the design of Central Park. His sons were landscape architects as well, and it was their firm, the Olmsted Brothers firm,
Okay.
in which William Lyman Phillips was an associate. And so the Olmsted brothers worked quite a bit in Florida. They worked on Bok Tower. They worked not so much on Fairchild, but William Lyman Phillips worked on Fairchild as well as Bok Tower. And so not surprisingly, William Lyman Phillips was inspired by Frederick Law Olmsted. The bridge, for example, the stone bridge at McKee is a very Olmsted-esque feature. And so he called upon many of the tendencies of Frederick Law Olmsted's designs in his own designs for the Florida gardens, to include McKee.
Wow. So tell me about your childhood in the gardens, and any, specific, favorite memories, maybe even smells that you may have, and, how does it translate to today? You being so active and at the garden
Right.
all the time.
Well, so I was born and raised in Vero Beach, and because my father was here, co-owner and operating the gardens, and so the weekends is when my sister and I were turned loose in the garden. My father would bring us on his gripping our hands, and then just release us into this magical 80-acre place where the sensory experience was just unforgettable. It smelled beautiful. It smelled different. It smelled deep and jungly. The monkeys were often being put out when we arrived. The macaws were squawking. The peacocks were hollering. There was so much noise in the garden, which was wonderful noise, much of which has been recreated for Jungle Lights. And to be turned loose under this canopy of tangled trees was magical. And I knew the monkeys' names, and I knew the macaws' names, and there used to be dispensers of corn, and for 5 cents you could get a handful of corn and throw it up to the animals, who were basically loose. They were not in cages. Some of them were, the otters, for example, were, but the monkeys were on chains, that wires above our heads. And so they looked very natural in the garden, and they were quite animated, particularly in the morning near feeding time, and again in the afternoon. And they were a wonderful and magical addition to the garden. At the time that I was growing up there, my feeling was, isn't this how every child grows up? Don't we all come here and enjoy this magical place? And we would come on school trips. And so it didn't occur to me what an extraordinary place it was, and what an unusual visionary my great-grandfather and Waldo Sexton were. And so, but like so many people who grew up in Vero Beach, I was eager to get out. And I left to go away to school, and I thought I'd never come back, candidly. And while I was gone, my father had the difficult decision to close the garden, because Disney World had opened at this point, and I-95 and the Turnpike, as I mentioned earlier, were pulling people away from the coast. And who could compete with those massive animated theme parks? A roadside attraction from the 1930s? Right. I don't think so. I mean, my father used to say people want to ride trees. They don't want to climb trees. And I think he had a point. Our whole sense of what was entertaining changed. And I don't think anybody at the time thought, we have to preserve this historic piece of land. We have to preserve parts of Florida that tell us what Florida was like. No one was thinking that way. We were all about expansion and building. But hey, they were in 1920 too. There just got to be more and more people. So I left. I never thought I'd come back, and I never really thought about the garden until this movement to save the garden began. My mother was still here. My father had died.
What year was that?
That was in 1988, 87, 88, when the developer who bought the property my father had written a very smart sales contract in which he protected the last 18 acres from development until the final payment was received by the developer. And when the payment was almost assured, the developer also had submitted to the town a plan for a shopping center that had 375 parking places. And the community said, no, we can't allow that. And ironically, it was the community of Vista Royale, which was the property that was developed on the remaining acres, or the original acres of McKee. So they said, no, we don't want a shopping center. And they really were the impetus for the movement to save the garden. And so I would get reports from my mother, who was very active in that. I was in New York at the time, following my career, pursuing my career. And she would say, you just can't believe it. I mean, one hurdle after another, they kept getting over these hurdles and obstacles. And they started with a small preservation society, which ultimately became the Indian River Land Trust, which ultimately, with the help of the Trust for Public Land, they did it. They did it over many years, 6 years, I think it took them.
Was that in 1996?
1996 was when it was, yes, completed.
And that would have been when the garden was named to the Florida Historic Landmark?
So a very significant piece of what happened was the observation of the preeminent garden group in the United States, which is the Garden Conservancy. They were watching what was happening. And when they saw that we had succeeded in saving the garden, and we're now looking for a firm to help us restore it and reopen it, the Garden Conservancy said, this is a preservation project of national significance. And it was that endorsement that helped us obtain additional recognition, which is listing on the National Historic Landmark, Florida Heritage Landmark, and all of those organizations which recognize historical things said, this is important, keep your eye on it, and let us do what we can to help them raise the money to reopen it. And those were some of the most meaningful things, starting with the Garden Conservancy.
Okay, so I was also reading yesterday that the garden received a grant and an award for the water lily and the water gardening society. And is it the 48th in the country?
Well, actually,
or was there 48?
We started with so 2 awards, 2 different organizations, one national, one international.
Okay.
And we're so proud of both of them. But they'll go to the first one was actually the International Water Lily and Water Gardening Society. And they certified 51 of our water lilies as a collection of excellence. Initially it was 48, and then we added some more, and now we're at 51.
Now, does any of that relate back to your great-grandfather bringing any of the plants that he brought from South America?
Well, I'd like to tell you that, yes, we found the seeds in the 20 years that the garden was dormant, and we were able to revive them and put them in the ponds, but that's not what happened. In fact, what happened is the legacy of the water lilies and the orchids at the gardens before they closed was of such renown that they had been traded to other growers and other gardens, and we were able to pull back and bring back some of those from those other gardens, but they didn't survive the 20 years of dormancy of the garden. And by the same token, we have a very, very exceptional aquatics expert, Nikki, who passionately nurtured these water lilies and kept organizing the collection until she presented it to the International Water Lily and Water Gardening Society. And they said, yes, you have achieved what very few gardens in the world have achieved, 7 to be exact, and we're one of them, in certifying these collections of excellence. So our water lilies are truly exceptional, and they are as prolific today as they were when the garden was open in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Right. So, and I know the garden just received the Jean and John Green Award, which was the 3rd in
Yes,
the world?
in the country.
In the country,
They're an
sorry.
American organization, and yes, and
Okay.
that one. I mean, they're both incredibly important to us, but that one I think speaks to the importance of the Garden Conservancy and what their efforts are, which is to preserve American gardens. And remember, they were the ones in 1996 who said this is something to keep your eye on. It's a preservation project of national significance.
Okay.
And now they say, my goodness, here you are, however many years later, and we bestow upon you recognition, the highest recognition they have, which is the Jean and John Green Prize for Excellence
Yes.
in American Gardening, because we think you've earned it. And that's, wow.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Wow.
So when you came back to Vero and got back involved with the garden,
Yeah.
what was your, goal and where?
Well, it's funny. I wasn't planning to come back. Okay,
Right.
so
I
let's
read
start
that.
there. And then, and I was living happily and working in New York City. And I got a call one day from a name Alma Lee Loy, who was on our board, very good friend of the family's. And she said, Marion, you must come represent the family on the board. And I thought, okay, when Alma Lee Loy calls you, you say, yes, Alma Lee, I'll be right there. And so I got on a plane and I came down and I met the president of the board at the time, and Susan Schuyler Smith, who was very instrumental in helping to raise the money and awareness for the need to save the garden. And that was in 2012. And I said, yeah, okay, I can do that. I wasn't living here. I knew that I'd be coming down for the board meetings, but I did appreciate that Amelie said, you are family. You have an obligation. You have a responsibility to help the garden. And I thought, I'd never really thought about it, but she was right. She was right.
So as a board member and a family member, obviously McKee Botanical Gardens is a huge legacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you separate your personal feelings, and sometimes that can get in the way, the personal versus professional, and
right,
the direction that things maybe need to go in can be.
Well, I have to give full credit to the past 25 years in which we had a tremendous team who nurtured and guided and stewarded the garden to where it is today, when Rochelle,
Yes.
who is also exceptional.
She's a star.
She's a rock star,
Yeah.
but so were the others, but they each had different responsibilities. They each had to do something different with the garden. And I think that the community saved this garden, and so we owe it to the community to let the garden be the garden that it once was, which was internationally renowned. And Rochelle, I think, singularly understands the importance of the living collection.
Yes.
That is the asset.
Yes.
That was the vision. That's what our founders preserved. That's what this community preserved. And so that's our focus. And how do we expand people's understanding and appreciation of the living collections of the garden?
Where do you see the garden in, let's say, 5 years from now and then 10 years from now? What are your goals, both personally and professionally?
Well, my goals are what the board sees for the garden. And my professional background is marketing and communications.
Okay.
And so I bring to McKee at this time almost what it needed, which was the ability to tell the historical story in the context of the current mission, and to help enunciate in a story what the future opportunity is, and that's linking it to its past.
Yes.
Because I think 2 generations of people in Florida in this community had no idea what McKee Jungle Gardens was.
Well, I was born and raised in Stewart.
Okay.
My family moved up in the late 60s, early 70s from Fort Lauderdale. Both my
Okay.
parents were born.
Mhm.
And I never realized the extent until I came and toured the grounds. And I just thought, wow, like so many people don't know
Right.
all of what
Right.
the garden holds
Right.
and the significance.
Correct.
Because obviously, as the Treasure Coast becomes, what is St. Lucie County, the #1 county, I think, that people are relocating to, whether they're coming from down south or somewhere
Right.
else. Vero Beach, Stewart.
Right.
So I think that lends an even more importance, and to link it with the history so that people understand
Exactly.
where it came from and now
Right.
where it's going.
Right. Yeah. I like to say, Amy, that there is a trio or a trinity of cultural arts here. We have the museum, of
Right.
course, we have the theater, and we have the botanical garden.
Mm-hmm.
And we were first.
Yes.
We're the first, we're the oldest, we're the largest, and we're the only public garden. And I think for a small community like ours,
Yes.
to have those three behemoth forms of education and interest and enjoyment and entertainment is astonishing. We're such a lucky community to
Yes.
enjoy those. But we've been a little bit bashful about telling our story and a little bit quiet about the assumption everyone knows the history.
I think some of that's the community, how the community as a whole is like to the humbleness.
Right.
I think,
Yes, yes,
and
we
to
are. Yeah.
not boast about things.
Right, right.
But there is a time and a place to do that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
certainly I think that,
The centennial perhaps
Yes.
gives you that
Yes.
the platform. And
Right.
so we're stepping up and saying, yeah, we were here and we helped make Vero interesting and exciting and important. And we disappeared for a little bit, but we're back stronger than ever. And we are an important part of what is unique about this community. But I think the most important thing that we are is an example of what this whole place used to look like.
yes.
You know,
That's-
the native
that's-
jungle
yes.
hammock. This is
Correct.
what Florida looked like.
Yes, and it's important that we keep that.
Yes. Well, that we be mindful
Yes,
that progress means we have less of this.
correct.
And all the more reason to protect what we do have if we can. And we can and we did. And so let's celebrate that.
So tell me a little bit about the history of jungle lights, because obviously you talking about your childhood and the monkeys,
Yeah.
running through the canopies and the macaws.
Right.
Is there any was there a theme there?
Well, I'll tell you that as a child, I never would have run through the jungle at night, ever, never. That would have been much too frightening, way too scary. But today, when we can add lights, it's far more interesting. And so over the years, it's been called many things: Festival of Lights, Holiday of Lights, Jungle Nights, Jungle Lights. We've settled on Jungle Lights because we're in a jungle. It's a historic jungle, and the lights enable us to enjoy the jungle at a time of day and at a time of year that we otherwise wouldn't be able to. So in thinking about the centennial celebration, you aptly pointed out that the jungle gardens opened in 1932. How do you get to 100? Well, we go back to the plant explorers who brought back those exotic specimens in 1926 for the commercial nursery, which was on the perimeter of the property. And we say that's when the idea started, was with those living collections that McKee and Sexton said, we'll use these in what will become the roadside attraction. So because we are also celebrating the 25th anniversary in 2026, in order to make the 25th anniversary important,
Right.
we had to celebrate the 100th, right? Because why is 25 such a big deal? Well, it's a big deal if you really started 100 years ago.
Yes.
So all that led us to, well, now how do we tell the story that very few people know about the plant explorers and what they brought back that became the living collections of the garden? And so we had to invent Ned Whitlock, who was our AI-generated plant explorer from 1926 with a wonderful voice. And some of my friends find him terrifically handsome.
I think he's in the Hall of, is it the Hall of
Hall of Giants?
Hall of Giants?
No, he's not in the Hall of Giants, although that would certainly be a good place to put him because he's a giant. Rudolph is in the Hall of Giants right now for
Okay.
Jungle Lights.
Okay.
But he is on our website, and he is our guide. In just 56 seconds, I think, he tells you what you're about to experience when you visit the jungle for Jungle Lights. And it is 6 countries of the 8 in the Amazon, and there are wonderful signs and creatures and sounds from the Amazon jungle recreated and alive for the nights at McKee. And this is the most impressive and most expansive holiday light display we've ever done. All the hardscapes are candy cane, illuminated
Wow.
like candy canes, and the music is festive, and the tree lighting was last night. But when you step into the jungle, you're stepping into a jungle at night, and it is magical.
Wow.
Just magical. And this is the 19th annual, I believe, and it's been growing and very organic initially.
It's a tradition, I think, at this point on the Treasure Coast, as to go to the jungle lights.
I think it has become one.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I want to go back just a little bit, and telling that story, translating to the Hall of Giants, because I thought that was such a fascinating building, set of buildings.
It is.
And the history, also talking about Vero Beach, and how that came about.
Yes.
I
can tell you the story. It's a wonderful story, and it's a very Waldo Sexton story, because it was Waldo who in 1909 at the St. Louis World's Fair saw the Calantis mahogany table that is now in the Hall of Giants. He first saw it. He was 19 years old. He was enamored with wood, as we know, from the Ocean Grill and the Driftwood and, of course, the Hall of Giants. But he didn't have anything. He didn't know what to do with it. So he followed it for 36 years. And that particular piece of wood went to the American Museum of Natural History in New York, where it was on display for many years in the Philippine Pavilion until the Philippine Pavilion was closed down. And then it went to a lumber yard in New York. And so someone was thinking they would cut it up until a furniture maker in Brooklyn found this 35-foot long piece of Calantis mahogany and said, oh, no, I can do something with that. And the furniture maker bought the wood from the lumber yard and sat on it for a little while. And somehow the furniture maker and Waldo Sexton met. Perhaps we think at the New York World's Fair. It was about that time.
Okay.
The furniture maker described this piece of wood. Waldo said, I know that wood. I saw it in St. Louis. It was at the American Museum of Natural History. I'll buy it from you. He did. It was shipped down the intercoastal. It landed in Fort Pierce. It was trucked up to Vero, and then he had to figure out what to do with it. And so, with his finger in the sand at McKee, he drew what he interpreted as a ceremonial Polynesian palace to house his board.
Okay.
And the board went in place, and the Hall of Giants was built around it, and that's how it got to be the Hall of Giants. And who could have known how significant that board was in 1909 and how significant it is today? And when the gardens closed, many people ask what happened to the board. Well, a very, very good friend of the gardens was Peter O'Malley, who owned the Dodgers at the time.
Okay.
And he had a boardroom at Dodgertown that he thought the table would be perfect in. And so he said, Art Latta, my father, I'll take this off your hands and put it in the Dodgertown boardroom. So off it went, but it went into storage. It never got used as a conference table. The Dodgers were sold, and the table sat in storage until the gardens reopened, when Peter O'Malley said, yes, I'd be very happy to loan it to you, because I'm not sure he was entirely convinced that we were going to make a go of this.
Okay.
And once he was absolutely certain we were all about being big and important and successful, he gifted it back to the garden. So the table now belongs to us, and it's in the Hall of Giants. It will never move, and it has hosted giants. It continues to be an incredible story.
I just wanted to make sure that we got that story out, because a lot of times when you're walking by or walking in through the garden, people don't realize what that is. Mm-hmm. So they sometimes walk around it.
It's big.
Yep, it's big. But I just wanted to make sure that everybody, that's something that you definitely have to go see when you're there. Yes. So how do you see your family continuing on with your legacy and stewardship?
Right. I really do believe this is a community garden. My great-grandfather and Waldo Sexton started it, but it belongs to the community. And I want to help with the history if I can. I want to help tell the story if I can and where I can. And you perhaps know that we're working on a commemorative book that will be introduced by Rizzoli. It's being published by Rizzoli, and for the 25th anniversary. It's been extensively researched, beautifully photographed by Nak Min No, who is a world-renowned landscape photographer. And I think for me that I've delivered what I believe is important for the family legacy, and but others need to shape McKee today. And Rochelle, I think, is so much the right person for that.
Yes, she is. Yes.
And she so appreciates the living collections and the importance of nurturing them, nurturing the staff that nurtures them, finding the experts, teaching what we know about those collections and their history, not just here in Vero and at the garden, but in Florida.
Right.
And she is passionate about understanding what other gardens are doing nationally and internationally. So she watches our place in the broader landscape and is helping guide McKee to that place that for me is the penultimate of the family legacy, which is an internationally renowned garden.
The legacy that your family is tremendous.
Yeah.
And I just, thank you. So if someone is watching this podcast or listening and they want to get involved, what kind of ways can they get involved?
Well, volunteers are the heartbeat of McKee, and we welcome them and we hug them and love them. We just had 2 who retired after 10 years of devoted service. You don't have to be a horticultural expert. You don't even have to know anything about plants. There's so many areas where you can be helpful. Jungle Lights, for example, is our biggest community event, and so we need the most volunteers to help guide visitors and direct visitors and keep traffic moving. But we need assistance with teaching classes. We need assistance with, excuse me, there are many, many ways that volunteers can be helpful. Sometimes we need administrative help. Sometimes we need help getting invitations out. There's lots of ways that people can be helpful. The only thing that's required, I think, is that you love McKee.
Okay.
Because that makes your work not seem like work.
Yes. So McKee, there's a lot of opportunities in educational.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas that I also think about, which was interesting because Rochelle tells the story about during COVID.
Mm.
So it's also a wellness.
Yes.
A lot of people, when they were, you were obviously quarantined and,
Yes.
Said to stay inside. Once things started reopening, people started coming out to the garden.
Yeah.
And that's what they would do. And and that was their wellness, your mental health, walking through the beautiful garden and smelling the smells.
And yes, Amy, it was very fortuitous that we had completed a very major capital campaign to build the children's garden that opened in January of 2020.
Wow.
And the garden closed in March of 2020 because of COVID, and then reopened in May. So much sooner than many organizations were able to open. And yes, so the fact that we had the children's garden at the same time that the world was going through COVID meant that we were an oasis for outdoor activity and calm and a sense of healing.
Yes.
It was a very holistic experience visiting the garden at that time. Things were quieter, no trains, less traffic. It was a very quiet, beautiful experience. And yeah, I think it helped nurture a lot of people and carry a lot of people through what was a very difficult time for the world.
What is your favorite part of the garden? Or do you have a favorite?
Oh, it depends on the day, I think, and my mood, I suppose. Sometimes I like being deep on the historic main jungle trail. Other times I like being by the meditation pond where I can hear the water flowing.
Oh, yes.
Sometimes if something's in bloom, I'm drawn to the fragrance. The butterfly ginger is my all-time favorite. It stops me in my tracks whenever I whiff it.
Yes, I've smelled that. It is. It's just, you're like, where is that?
Where is that?
Yes, yes.
And as a child in the Royal Palm Grove, which of course was quite a bit longer and bigger at the time, I always fancied being married there. So today, sometimes maybe around an anniversary, I think, oh, wouldn't it have been wonderful to have been a bride here?
So you didn't get married
I
there?
didn't. It was closed.
Okay.
No, the garden was closed.
All right. And they don't allow the, anymore.
No.
Well, it's, it's Mary and I, you're so fortunate to have had that. Do you have any family members that will carry on after, when you decide to retire? Or...
there are 16 direct descendants living of Arthur McKee. We're dispersed all over the country. Several of them came to visit me last December, a year ago December, and hadn't been to the garden for 30 or 40 years. So that was very interesting. They have children, so those are the additional descendants. Might they have an interest? I'm not sure. I think part of the reason I love the garden is because I grew up in it.
Right.
I rang the bells. I played with the monkeys. I could name the workers. It was my childhood playground, and it wasn't so for my cousins. So that, I think, makes me sort of uniquely qualified to have this interest that I have.
Yes.
I'm also a storyteller. That was my profession, marketing and communications. So the opportunity to shape and tell the story has been so gratifying. It wakes me up at night. Oh, I forgot to mention that. Or I need to add this to a piece that we're writing.
So is the garden what brought you back to Vero?
I think it's fair to say it was. My husband, who's Dutch, said when we were married, for better or worse, but not one night in Florida. He wanted nothing to do with Florida. And I was okay with that because, hey, I left. I wasn't planning to come back. But when I joined the board, shortly after I joined the board, I saw an opportunity to really start the historical ball rolling. I said, I want to study the archives. I want to see what's in there. I want to familiarize myself with them so I can write a proposal for a professional archivist to come in and shape the archives. And so I told my husband, never a night in Florida, listen, I need a month. Come down. We'll bring the dogs. Find someplace nice for us to stay and let me do this project. Okay, fine. So we picked March, which is the mud season. Smart. I picked an oceanfront, old Florida cottage. Smart. He liked the rustic nature of it. He liked being right on the ocean. And we brought our dogs. And he played with them while I was at work and read and enjoyed what Vero is, which is so different than so much of Florida. And I dug into the archives, and that was the most illuminating experience. And I think that was the moment I realized I need to help them tell the story.
Has he come around? I mean, how does he feel about the garden?
So it only took about, 4 years. We bought a home, we bought property, and we built, and we're now Florida residents. And so he turned around. Yeah, I think it's fair to say he loves it here. Absolutely loves it.
Is he a volunteer?
He is Rochelle calls him the deputy director of marketing. I take home some of the ideas that we're bantering about, and he who was in private equity has a very strong point of view, and he'll either nay or yay, and I carry that back to Rochelle. So he's the deputy director of marketing, we say.
So do you have any, are there any or personal goals or, let's say, awards or expansion or anything new or anything that you have on the horizon that you see you want to accomplish with the garden?
I want to support Rochelle and what she wants to accomplish, and I'm there to help her develop whatever materials are necessary, whether they're visual or written, to support that and to support her staff, who are experts in their fields and who have toiled in and cared for the garden far longer than I have.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really, I'm in a unique position because of my heritage,
Yes.
but it is so much more important to me that the current stewards of the garden be able to drive it forward. And whatever I can provide in the way of help for that to the board, to Rochelle, to her staff, that's why I'm there.
Rochelle is a superstar, and I never had this conversation with her, but she's always trying to teach me about the water lilies and the different. So one of the questions that I had wanted to ask her was her horticulture background and how,
Well, she will certainly answer that better than I can, but she, like me, grew up under coconut trees in the Philippines, and her grandmother, I believe, had a coconut orchard or grove.
Okay.
And so, and also a prolific flower garden. And I believe it was there that, knowingly or unknowingly, the drive was shaped, the interest was formed, and she pursued. I don't think she initially pursued it, but a garden pursued her, and that was Mounts in
Yes.
Palm Beach.
Right.
And she left what had been her training to apply that training and her passion, which was horticulture, combine those two things together. And she was a tremendous success at Mounts, caught our attention, and we were thrilled that she was interested in carrying the torch forward for McKee.
Interesting. So one of the last things that I wanted to ask you about is the centennial celebration. Do we have any information about that? Has anything been planned?
Oh,
I know we're
yes.
working on the book.
Right. So the centennial celebration, the focus is really on the founders and the living collections, and what happened in the period of the centennial. So my great-grandfather, who was the sole owner of the gardens from 1941 onward, Waldo went on to run his numerous other businesses. My great-grandfather closed the garden in 1943 so that it could be a training ground for the naval pilots who were training here.
That's right.
And they trained in jungle survival. So we have something planned, we hope, with the Blue Angels, who will be here in May.
Wow.
To honor that important history. You may know that General Jim Mattis, who was the 26th Secretary of Defense, commemorated a plaque to those naval pilots who trained there in 2023. So that piece of history is truly American history, and I think that's a very important thing for us to focus on. We will endeavor to ensure that McKee's infrastructure is always able to host not only the lights that you can experience now, but more lights in the future and more opportunities to enjoy the garden at night, not just during the holidays. So that will be a campaign that will kick off shortly.
Okay, great.
We have the centennial exhibition is Florigami in the Garden. Kevin and Jennifer Box from Santa Fe, who have produced these extraordinary sculptures, some 30 feet tall as the Christmas tree that's there now, which is a kinetic sculpture. And they all celebrate pollination. So that's an important piece of the education that we'd like to impart when we're thinking about what we do in the garden for the public. We hope that we might entice Mr. O'Malley to come back from Los Angeles to be entertained on St. Patrick's Day, which is when he used to host the Dodgers St. Patrick's Day picnic.
Interesting.
Which was a raucous occasion, you might imagine. And we hope to entice, we had hoped that we could bring the Vero Beach Marching Band back to McKee. They perform there many times along with cheerleaders and the football team.
Okay.
And we had wanted to bring them back on the 29th, but they're so good that they've been pulled away. So we'll get them there on another occasion. And all this is focusing on what is partially the living collections and the history over the last 100, but setting up the 25th anniversary, which was really the celebration of the community that rescued and restored and reopened the garden.
Perfect. With that said, thank you very much, Marion. And I wish, Rochelle, but like I said, it's all good things.
Yes.
The garden's receiving another award. I am Amy Branden, editor-owner of the Scout Guide. Thank you for joining us on today's podcast, our first podcast for Scouted Treasure Coast. If you would like to learn more information about Scouted Treasure Coast, please visit the Scout Guide online, Instagram at the Scout Guide Treasure Coast, and at the Scout Guide on Facebook. We will see you next time, and thank you for joining us.